RadioWeek 2026.
Smart ideas for radio and audio operators.
For more than a century, local radio has been a vital part of our daily lives, connecting communities, informing, and entertaining. And as the media landscape evolves, innovations continue to influence how listeners engage with content.
We've been celebrating the 20-year anniversary of HD radio in OEM cars. We started with BMW 20 years ago, and we're in about 115 million cars today. This has really been a great, exciting ride working with the NAB and the broadcast community. And there's a lot of different choices consumers have in the dash, and we work with each car company to make sure that radio remains a preeminent content source in the dash and not buried 20 or 30 menus down, which you can really get nowadays with the modern vehicle.
Well, to me, that last point's the most important one. As a result of this work, we're easily accessible to the user.
These innovations give broadcasters tools for a next-generation radio experience, keeping radio at the center of the dash and in the heart of our communities. NAB's partnership with technology leaders like Xperi ensures that broadcasters reach audiences wherever they are, especially in the car.
This is a battle for the dash, but I'm happy to say that if you go talk to the automotive industry, they really see digital radio, HD radio, as an integral part of the entertainment platforms they offer in vehicles. Radio has a durability that very few other mediums have, particularly in a vehicle. That lean back experience, you want to be in the car, you want to be entertained, but you still have to drive. Radio is perfectly set up for it.
There's something unique to that live and local that only radio's providing that consumers continue to demand.
I hope you got to see that video stream as easily as possible. I don't know. I had a couple of interruptions. I hope that wasn't the case for everybody, because we might have to do some explaining about how this actually works. Did you guys see it all fluently and smoothly?
Yeah, the music was awesome too, man.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay, good. No, then it's just me and my broadband. Well, anyway, fantastic to have everybody here. Obviously the panel, but there's so many of you from all over the world who've registered. We're delighted that you've come to this particular session. It's brought to you by Xperi, and we're going to talk about the connected car, because that's really where the biggest challenges are for radio right now. I mean, it's been an incredible journey for radio. This was a temple, essentially, the car, where there was only one option or a couple of CDs and so on, but radio was dominant. But obviously, all of that has changed. And that means that, fortunately for us, there's a company like Xperi inventing every day a new experience in the car. And that's what we're going to talk to you about today. It's how is that experience in the car making radio look like it belongs, because there's more screen space than ever before. And not only are we going to talk about how that renders and looks for your listeners around the world if you have DTS-enabled cars there, but we're also going to talk about what the analytics does in terms of benefiting programming strategy and commercial strategy. So it's a pretty exciting session. You're going to learn a hell of a lot. And most importantly, you have got to ask questions. We've got some questions already lined up for ourselves, but none of what we ask is going to be as valuable as what you ask, because you know what really matters for your station wherever you are. So feel free throughout the session to tap into the comments banner, put your question through, and as and when it's relevant throughout the session, we'll flight the question on screen, and then one of our experts will answer it. Let's start by getting the experts to introduce themselves. Thank you so much, guys, for mostly US-based, so it's early morning for you. Pierre, let's start with you.
Sure. I'm the Chief Insights Officer at a radio broadcasting group called Cumulus, and we also have a national radio network called Westwood One, and I'm the Chief Insights Officer, and I focus on helping salespeople drive revenue with exciting innovation like Q and DTS AutoStage.
Fantastic. Let's move on to Mike.
Good morning here in the U.S. Good afternoon to everyone else. I'm Mike Holvey, President and CEO. of the RAB. The RAB is the National Trade Association for the broadcast radio industry in the U.S. We also have members, international members, as well as our association. We spend a lot of time on both sides with the advertisers, but also with the broadcasters, helping to connect the dots. I'm also lucky enough to be a 35 plus year local radio operator. So I see both sides of the equation. And we were an early adopter of Xperi in my broadcast company before I joined RAB. So I have an interesting insight again on both sides of the picture.
That's great. Steve?
Like Mike, I am a longtime local broadcaster on a group of stations in Kentucky, but I've also spent a large part of my career being involved with the National Association of Broadcasters, both on the board and staff. But for the past 6 years, I have been the CEO of Q, which is a company that is really focusing on content management and bringing the capabilities of the visualization metadata management to life for the broadcast industry. And certainly appreciate this panel and the opportunities that are ahead for broadcasters.
Brilliant, Steve. And Joe, finally, you and your team are the ones that are trying to invent the future, well, succeeding in inventing the future of radio in the car and making it possible for us to stay alive. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to think we're well along that trajectory of reinventing radio in the car and keeping it competitive. But I'm Joe D'Angelo. I'm the SVP of Commercial Strategy and Partnerships now at Xperi. I'm one of the founders of Ubiquity, the company behind HD Radio. I think I celebrated my 26th year with the organization, developing technologies to help the radio industry stay competitive. I've never owned or been behind the mic, but I'm very committed to the future of this industry and proud of the work that we've been able to do to really help radio stay competitive, primarily in the dash.
And of course, I've just looked at the wide expanse of people that have registered and are watching. And in each of these markets, radio in the car is critical because between 55 to 80% of overall revenue comes from drive times, morning and afternoon drive, between 55 and 80. So it depends on how mature the market is, how much competition there is, but that's a substantial chunk regardless. And so you've got to do everything possible to remain relevant, real, available, accessible, and look like you matter in the motor vehicle. So let's talk a little bit about, Joe, about what DTS AutoStage has done. Perhaps we can put up a couple of slides. You can tell us a little about the scale and scope of the business and what's it doing right now.
Sure, absolutely. If we go back to slide 1, you'll see the user experience for a car equipped with DTS AutoStage. You see this is the Mercedes Hyperscreen, which is an amazing pillar-to-pillar implementation. But what we've done is we've leveraged the internet connection in the car to create a complementary service to the broadcast radio signal and really enrich the whole user experience from discovery all the way down to measurement. So everything that you're seeing across these 3 screens basically is representing the broadcast radio programming that's available in the market. In this case, this is Washington, D.C., but as you'll see later, we have services on air in over 160 countries around the world. And I think if you look at this implementation, you'd sit back and have to say, this is a very modern, digital, immersive user experience for, in this case, broadcast radio, both HD radio, analog radio, DAB, and CDR in China.
And FM. So if you're coming in from Africa, if you're in Ghana or Nigeria or South Africa, all of this remains completely relevant because you will be getting cars that are already fitted in OEM with DTS AutoStage. Is that right?
That's right.
A significant number of them.
Yeah, this absolutely works with analog, both AM and FM. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a list of our automotive partners. So to date, we have commercially launched in the market with 13 OEM brands. We have 14 million active cars on the road. And and that those cars are the lifeblood to the measurement, which we'll get into in more detail. But we have many more car brands that are in the development stages, moving through our certification, and we'll be bringing cars to market, additional brands over the next 12 to 18 months. So
in practical terms, all that adoption by all these motor vehicles, what does it mean for a broadcaster, radio operators?
Well, yeah, it means that as these cars hit the road in your country, you are going to get an immersive, rich user experience around radio that you kind of saw in the first slide, and you're going to benefit from measurement data. And if we look at the next couple slides, you can see the implementation is very specific to the brand. So unlike CarPlay or Android for Auto, where you have enriched user experiences around IP services, they all kind of look the same, whether it's implemented in a Mercedes or a BMW or a Ford. What AutoStage allows is the automaker to maintain that design style, that look and feel that's unique to their brand, while representing a very rich radio experience. I think we might have one more example. No, that was it. But across all those 14 OEMs, they maintain a very unique user experience. They are able to leverage all the content that we deliver, but we ensure that all the content is used with the consent of broadcasters. So it's very important that broadcasters always retain editorial control over the content that's displayed along with their stations. And as I mentioned, this is a global platform deployed in over 160 countries. What you see represented here in the green is basically a global heat map for the geographies where we have active vehicles on the road, connecting to our system, listening to radio, and being enriched with our IP-delivered metadata.
The presentation, when you started it, had sort of 4 big headings: discovery, engagement, monetization, and measurement. Mm-hmm. You're kind of implying that you work across all of these areas with AutoStage. You're actually offering measurement, you're offering opportunities for new commercialization, all of it. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the combination of broadcast and IP in the car is creating economies of scale, economies of delivery, but unlocking tremendous new opportunities. Discovery is, I think, first and foremost. We need to make radio easily accessible. We need to be able to promote the programming that's available in the local market. So discovery is a foundation of the service. Once you then engage with programming and tune to a station, we want to make sure that that user experience is enhanced. It's a very rich, modern digital experience, which also starts to bleed into monetization opportunities. Steve will talk about how Q is enabling broadcasters to take advantage of the metadata on the dash, the enriched commercial inventory and visuals to create new revenue opportunities. And because the AutoStage platform, by definition, is a connected service, we are able to measure user engagement with radio, user exposure to advertising. And while we're doing the plumbing, I think it's going to be very interesting to hear from, Pierre, Steve, and Mike on what is the impact of that measurement? What is the impact of this new level of insights for programmers, for sellers, for GSMs? Again, we're just the infrastructure, but we're providing this data to help drive the business behind radio.
Before I get onto them and we start getting deeply into the analytics, which is one of the reasons most people from around the world are tuning in, I'm sure, because they want to understand how that data can help programming, how it can help sales. When you say discoverability, and we all understand how critical it is because there's so much choice now everywhere on any screen, how intuitive is it with AutoStage? Can you, for example, say, I want to listen to news right now? I mean, can you do it by voice?
Yeah, absolutely.
How is it done?
Yeah. I mean, one of the opportunities and challenges facing the industry, especially as they convert to digital with HD radio, CDR, and DAB is there's this proliferation of choice, and there's new brands and new content that, quite honestly, audiences aren't familiar with. So when you get in the car, which is typically, your primary function is operating the vehicle, scanning the dial to try to find programming is a real challenge, especially get exposure to new programming. So we do a couple things. We provide an equal, level playing field, let's say, for all programming. So it's all available at that top level, whether it's a legacy analog broadcast or a new DAB broadcast. They all get the same prominence. Because we're delivering metadata via the IP channel for all stations that are listenable in the market, we do support both genre filtering and discovery, as well as voice agents, where you can basically speak to the radio, say, for example, you could say, is Taylor Swift playing? And if Taylor Swift is playing, you'll get a confirmation and be able to tune to that station. You'll be able to say, tune to sports, tune to country, or speak the specific name or format or call sign of a radio station and be able to, get greatest hits just by asking for it. So yes, it's a very, very powerful medium for discovery and content selection.
Thanks for some of the questions already coming through. I just want to say hi to Alina from Namibia, who says that's where she's coming in from, which is brilliant. Lloyd Madure runs a radio station in South Africa, a really great station that's just won big awards a couple of months ago. This is a question we were going to get to anyway, but since he's popped it out, how quickly does the data and we're going to get into the data, how quickly does that get back to the station? You want to just quickly take that and then we'll get into it deeply.
Yeah, it takes us about 24 hours to process all the data. We literally are measuring billions of radio engagement events around the world. So by, probably 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning the next day, you will have access to all of the data for the previous day. So we're not quite real time, but we're pretty darn fast.
And the great thing about it is the sample sizes, depending on the market you're in and how many cars they're already there, some of those sample sizes are bigger than I know it's not as randomized maybe as Nielsen and so on, but the size, the actual scale can be much larger. So let's start to bring in that analytics side and let's understand how programming in particular, for starters, is affected positively by the technology that is now available in the car. Pierre, I want to bring you in as Chief Insights Officer at Cumulus Media because you're using this. So tell us a little bit about the benefits that radio broadcasters are getting from these tools and how is that different? How are they using it differently, say, for example, from the way they use traditional measurement tools, the programmers in particular? Let's start there.
Sure. So depending upon the country you're in, your audience measurement might be non-existent. You might get one survey a year. Maybe you get 2 surveys a year. There is generally a very long lag between the data that you have and the actual time it is now. I want you to focus on what Joe just said. Every market is getting next day data, next day audience shares, next day reach. So for programmers, that's incredible because you can see how special events or things happening in your market impacted yesterday. And for salespeople, it means now you're coming to clients with a high-tech, modern, cutting-edge measurement service that does not require a consumer to fill out a survey. It does not require a consumer to wear a gadget, a watch, or anything. In fact, the consumer doesn't even know this is happening. So it's like what TV has with set-top data. It's like what TV has with smart TV data. We now have our big data opportunity, and it means from a sales standpoint, we have much more credible data with much bigger sample sizes. In the US, on average, the sample size is about 4 times larger than what we're used to seeing in audience measurement. The bigger the city, the bigger the difference. So in bigger markets, it might be 50 times larger.
Wow.
So the other thing that we're seeing is it's very stable. You don't see the bounce and the up and the down that you might get with survey research. So it gives advertisers more confidence. It gives programmers more confidence in understanding, the data that they're seeing. And the car, if you look at the car, it's about half of all tuning minutes to radio. And in the car, radio's audience share of ad-supported audio is about an 85 share. So it's a very important platform to have this data. And think of DTS as the audience measurement, and think of Q as the visuals that go on the screen. And that's something that we as an industry have never had. We've never been able to offer a visual accompaniment to an ad on the radio. We now can. And also we can sell ads when songs are playing. So we can have a 30-second visual, static visual playing in the middle of a song. And people are constantly looking at the screen in the car. Why? They want to know what time it is. They want to know the title and artist of the song. So that real estate, that visual real estate, gets a lot of viewership, constant viewership in the car.
You talked about the sample size as we spoke earlier. It's pretty robust. Does that mean at Cumulus, for example, are your programmers making strategic decisions about morning and afternoon drive because they're seeing these sorts of numbers? Are they actually changing tactics? What is it doing? How much is it influencing programming decision making?
Well, one thing that I want to correct you on is that radio listening in the car is not just about morning and afternoon drive.
Sure,
in fact,
sure.
the time period with the greatest in-car listening is actually midday. So it's kind of happening all the way around the clock. And I'll give you an example from a market. It is common practice when there's a major concert in your market to play like a 2-hour music block of that famous artist.
Yes.
Leading up to the concert. The theory being that there's a lot of excitement about the concert occurring in town. People are on their way, going to see the concert, or they know it's happening. And programmers have always done this, never having any hard data to explain, like, is this a good or bad idea? And recently, they were able to look discreetly at the quarter hours from this day, and they discovered that it is not a good strategy. In fact, the listening versus the typical day was much lower. And this is something we've never had the evidence for. It just seemed like a good idea. So the benefit now is you can try things and then get fast feedback on whether they're driving audience or not.
I know you haven't tested this, but when I was running East Coast Radio, we used to do that 2-hour block after the concert.
Right.
Because we wanted them to already be thinking about what a great time they just had, brought to them by that radio station.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but this is really fascinating. We should pull up a couple of slides, Philippe. Philippe's working for us in the background. Let's just have a look at some of that data that's coming through radio market analytics.
Sure.
What can you tell us here?
Yeah. So we're all used to in radio looking at a ranker, in other words, who are the stations that have the highest share. So this is the dashboard that you get from DTS AutoStage. You can look at a ranker for last week. Think about that, last week. Like, we've never been able to do that. You can look at last month, last quarter, and the metrics are going to be familiar to you. Share, which is my tuning minutes for my station divided over all tuning minutes in my market. There's cum rating, which is what percent of the market was reached by my station. And then there's average time spent per vehicle, and then in aggregate. And if you look here, look at the sample size. This is Dallas, 107,291 vehicles.
Wow.
I mean, that is like, the Nielsen sample size in this market has got to be a couple of thousand. Yeah. So, this is like, 50x what we're seeing from Nielsen. And you notice the little gold boxes around the individual stations there. If you click on that, that'll open up additional analytics for your station, like day-by-day shares. There's a heat map. It shows you which other adjacent markets you show up in. When we go to the next.
Yeah, let's look at the next one.
This is so hard to see here. But this is more, rankings. We have 2 country stations in the market that do very well there. And you can also see very quickly the impact of special programming. For instance, it is common practice in the US to run Christmas music leading up to the holidays. And you can see day by day by day the impact of Christmas music, and it causes extraordinary lifts in audience measurement. Now, what's important about this is that the smallest markets can get this data. Normally in radio, we're used to big cities having fancy data and medium cities getting some data and small cities getting nothing. Here, everyone gets the same view. Even in the smallest towns, you will see sample sizes of 3,000 or 4,000. So it's a very democratic system in the sense that every market size gets the same data as the big cities.
And I think we've got some information also about how this helps you understand what's happening. Well, there's the reach data that's coming in. You want to talk to this first, and then we'll talk about
this is showing day by day audience share for a specific station. And this is not a slide that the broadcasters on this call are used to seeing. Like we don't see typically as an industry day by day audiences. So that's kind of exciting to be able to see this. And also look at how stable and steady these audiences are. Again, that's not, we're generally used to seeing a lot of bounce and wobble in our data. So fast data, stable data.
The next one I wanted to talk to you about, obviously this is a hell of a lot of that is going to make a big difference to programmers in terms of knowing how people are listening to them. But then there's also information about adjacent market performance. What does this mean? What does this speak to?
Well, there are advertisers that have locations in multiple cities, and this gives you ability to say, here's how my station does in my home market, and then here are markets nearby where my station shows up in, and you get to see that data.
So you could mine for new sales opportunities in markets that you wouldn't otherwise have gone to. Is that what this helps you do?
Yes, it helps you show that I have audience where you have locations. The other thing is that we often hear from broadcasters that are in resort communities, the ocean, the mountains, etc., that the audience, that they know that they have much more audience in the high season of their resort, but that never shows up in the ratings. This does. So if a vehicle comes into your market and is listening to local radio, that gets reflected in your data. And that we've never had that in the history of radio, to see when people come to our town and listen to our stations that we could show that audience.
Mike, you're with the RAB. If you want to pop in and say anything about some of this fascinating information we're now getting, please feel free to come in. And then after you, I'm going to take a couple of questions because I see quite a few questions have popped up from those that are watching. Mike, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Omar. Kind of reiterating what Pierre has said, but also setting up what Steve's about to say. Over the last couple of years, this has been a really exciting opportunity for U.S. radio broadcasters. And again, I'm speaking from my perspective, to be able to answer some questions that our marketers have had. A lot of the conversations, and Pierre is in these as well. We've had marketers say, help us help you. And what they mean by that is data and measurement and having the ability to be able to demonstrate some of these key factors that Pierre has brought forward. I said at the beginning that the company that I ran prior to joining RAB, we were early adopters. I literally was in the front row of the room when Pierre was a part of that discussion, and I immediately the value for a broadcaster and what we would be able to do, first of all, with our advertisers, and second of all, with our product. Pierre mentioned the word heat map. One of the things that we hear from some of our more local broadcasters in smaller places is proof of concept, proof of life, if you will. Who listens to your radio station? And there are questions that get raised. In some places, there's not a lot of data available. Now there is. And literally, we had a situation with one of my former advertisers in my former company. When we were having that conversation, we literally printed off the heat map from the Xperi DTS AutoStage, walked it into the advertiser, sat it down on the desk, and said, here's where our listeners are every single day. It happens to be at your front door. It made a difference in the dialogue with the advertiser. A very simple conversation that has been made available. There is an example of that, with the technology. The real time, and I use the term, and Joe and Pierre use, fast data or near real time is what we have described it with advertisers in the US, but literally being able to see, within 24 hours, robust data sets for those OEMs that our listeners are using or engaged with, is something that we've never had the ability to do, again, as an industry. So it's targeted, it's helping. The advertisers are interested. This group has also been on conversations with large and small advertisers who, again, are very interested in the capabilities that it's demonstrating. So these are wins. These are wins, and they're setting up new wins in the future. Brilliant.
I want to bring Bala's question in at this point, and then we'll talk a little bit more about audience daily engagement next. But let's get Bala's question on. He says, I'm sure you can all see it, but how do you prove the listening data is from real people actually paying attention, not just radios left on in parked cars? And he's got a second question after that as a follow-up. Let me just say it so that we can answer both between all of you. How much does the system cost for small broadcasters, and is the investment actually worth it compared to traditional audience research methods? Joe, do you want to have a go at the first part?
Yeah, sure. So the cars are feeding us GPS data, so we know the cars are moving. So that's the easy way of knowing that the cars are not stationary with the radio just left on. And then the second one, the DTS AutoStage, the integration and participation is free to broadcasters. So if you have, an automation system and can feed us live now playing data, my team will work with you to do the integration, but there is no charge to participate in the ecosystem.
Hey, Joe, if you don't mind, Omar, I'd like to take a shot at that first question too, because certainly there's some people that are actively engaged with listening and some that are passively engaged in listening. And that's just the nature of any medium. People leave televisions on all day in their homes. A car, people don't generally leave a car radio sitting and running for 8 hours while they're in their work. So it's even more actively engaged listening. But if you look at research for outdoor advertising, if you look at research for newspaper, if you look at research for online ads, there's always a certain amount of those that people are not going to see because they're distracted or something's going on at the time. But I think that this technology that Joe has and the messaging that people are using through our platform is so much more engaging than it's not typically a passive audience. They are people that are in the car listening to the station, seeing what's going on. But I think that's a challenge with any advertising medium, and I think we have a much better story to tell than most.
Just want to acknowledge Eleanor, Mark, Guillermo, Lloyd, Vaughan. We're going to get to you. We know your questions are flashing up on the side. We'll get to you as we continue the discussion, so don't go away. Stay with us. I want to move on to that slide 12 on audience daily engagement. Pierre, help us with this. It suggests a new level of behavioral insight is possible now, right?
Well, what you're looking at here is hour by hour listening to your station in the car. So you can see the big morning drive jump, and then it kind of drops down, and then it jumps up. And then inside the graph, you see the kind of a similar pattern, but it's smaller, and that's the historical pattern of the station. So on this particular day, there was heightened levels of listening. This is showing hour by hour. You can click on the individual day parts and go down to the quarter hour level. This is incredible granularity that we've never had for the most part as an industry, to see this amount of detail hour by hour. So now you can look at special programming, you can look at the impact of newscasts, and really see on a quarter hour by quarter hour basis, what's happening on your station. I'm going to go back to that heat map because we kind of flashed that on and flashed that off pretty quickly. A real life story. We had a radio station sit with a car dealer who didn't use radio. And the general manager said, I notice you have a beautiful big screen TV in your conference room. Can I plug my laptop in? He plugged his laptop and showed the heat map for his station. And the car dealer said, wait a minute, is that listening that's happening right out here on the highway that's passing my car dealer? And he said, absolutely. So he says, you have listeners literally next, coming right by my car dealership. And it was yes. He says, well, I should be advertising on your station. That is a story that we should be taking to advertisers around the world, is showing where the retailer has their location and the fact that my radio station on this heat map has listeners next to your business. Now, we've never been able to do that. Historically, when you run a zip code run, it's always tied back to the home address of the consumer. But now we can show advertisers listening that's happening near their locations. And that is a big deal.
Absolutely. Vaughn Taylor has a question, and I think this one's targeted at you, Joe, because it's also out of South Africa. They're anticipating DAB Plus at some stage. These questions about differentiating between enhancements that can be made on traditional analog platforms versus DAB Plus on AutoStage. How do they render?
Sure. So if you just think about the metadata with analog FM, you have RDS. So you can display some basic station information and now playing information. With DAB, you have DLS and slideshow. So you can push imagery, station logos at various resolutions, but you have to make significant trade-offs for DAB in terms of bandwidth. How much bandwidth do you want to apply to audio? How much bandwidth do you want to apply to text and visuals? With AutoStage, both analog and DAB stations are afforded a level playing field. We deliver high resolution station logos, detailed station information, now playing imagery. So whether it's an advertising image or album art, the analog radio station, the DAB radio station will have the same high resolution images available. And then I'm not sure if you noticed it in the initial slide, we also deliver additional information like song lyrics, local events, artist bios. All of this information is available and consistent for any broadcast medium. And I think that's very important because there are a lot of countries around the world that do not have a digital strategy yet. They are committed to analog. And those analog stations will have the same benefit of the rich visuals, rich text, all synchronized with the audio and all in the control of the broadcaster. So we're very excited about kind of leveling the playing field and elevating radio around the world, regardless of the broadcast infrastructure that's deployed.
A couple of quick questions. A follow-up from Lloyd. Does this require an opt-in, considering you're tracking vehicle movement?
So the short answer is yes. And we work with all the OEMs to implement the consent required based on the functionality and information that we are getting on the user behavior. Everything that we're doing with the analytics is both GDPR and CCPA compliant. So we have a very sophisticated infrastructure to manage all of this data, purge data, anonymize data. But yes, it's all done with consent.
Philippe, let's pop up Gareth Cherry's question while you're there. Are driver profiles and preferences portable across vehicles? And if so, how does that work? OEM account, DTS account, phone pairing, local only?
Sure. The first generation of the user implementation, which you're seeing now, does not support that. We are in a transition phase to our second generation of AutoStage that will have user profiles, portability, and account management. So not yet, but we are getting there.
We'll get to Ricardo from Brazil and Vaughan in a bit, but we want to now look at a couple of really fascinating insights for salespeople. Slides 15, I think sort of a headline slide, but I want to bring all of you in for this now. The sales team that's eager to boost their revenues. The biggest challenge for radio for such a long time, before we talk about the new opportunities that are emerging on screen, but one of the biggest issues has always been, how do you prove that there's a sale that's being made? How do you attribute the message to an outcome? I mean, is there anything in DTS that makes that a possibility somehow?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Pierre, do you want to take that one? I mean,
yeah. So DTS knows where the car is. Yep. DTS knows exposure to a radio ad. And so you can then be able to imagine a day very soon, I think in the next year, where we'll be able to say, here are the vehicles that were exposed to the retailer ad and what proportion of them went to the retailer. Here's a number of vehicles that were not exposed to the retailer's ad and what proportion of them went to the retailer. And then we can compare the lift in essence, location attribution for that particular retailer. So that's coming. Wow. But Steve can talk to you about, he's already done a large number of studies for the visuals and been able to show cause and effect among those people exposed or not exposed to the visuals in the dashboard for the advertiser.
That's your cue, Steve.
Well, it's pretty exciting. I was thinking earlier that there were two big challenges historically for the broadcast industry. Number one, are people really listening? And number two, what's the impact of radio on that? Generally, we were seen as the top of the marketing funnel, branding, name recognition, but we didn't really show the ability to push sales through that funnel to purchase intent and purchase. We've done a lot of research. Obviously DTS and this platform and the heat maps are showing that yes, people are listening to a particular station. So we're knocking that wonder, or that proof is being proven. That point is being proven. So that's great. And what we're trying to do is come back further and show the efficiency and effectiveness of adding visual components to a radio ad. I tell people all the time, I've written a lot of radio ads in my life. I know how to write a really good radio ad. I can use theater of the mind. I can put a sense of urgency. I can do all the things that make radio ads great. But when you add a visual, as you're seeing on the screen right now, for those that may be outside the States and not familiar with this campaign, Liberty Mutual Insurance has a jingle, Liberty, 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 and we were able to replicate visually that jingle. And people saw that, sang the jingle in their head, and we saw a significant lift on this campaign. But whether it's a particular offer, whether it's branding, and we have a lot of different tools using the technologies that are there, whether it's branding, whether it's call to action, but adding a visual to the radio component makes the ad more effective, increases the impact that the ad campaign has, and certainly more importantly, or just as importantly, it's creating real revenue lift for radio stations.
You're making these statements, Steve, about revenue lift, about making it more effective, but do you have evidence of that?
Oh yeah, Pierre, are you comfortable anecdotally, because you're on here and you represent Cumulus, you're part of
Sure.
It. I think that'd be the best one to say.
Yeah, so we looked across 6 or 7 different advertiser categories. These are advertisers that were running visual campaigns like you see on the screen with that visual and the words. And we looked at consumers that were exposed to these visuals and those that were not. And consumers exposed to the visuals had higher awareness for the advertiser, stronger purchase intent, stronger brand consideration, and stronger brand favorability.
You got that through a survey post the advertising? How did you get those answers?
Yeah. So this was a 1-month campaign that these 7 different advertisers were running. Yeah. And a survey was conducted among those exposed and those not exposed. So this is hard evidence that on-screen visuals can drive mid and top funnel lift for the advertiser.
And then I think, Omar, the question was also about how much money is being generated. Yeah. We're talking millions of dollars that are being generated, by large companies. And I want to protect my clients, but one of the larger groups, $6 million of revenue on this. Pierre, I think I don't want to put you in a situation with Cumulus, but I think you're seeing significant revenue lift within your stations at Cumulus.
Absolutely. And in fact, there's a company called Advertiser Perceptions that surveys media agencies and advertisers and asks them a very point blank question. If you could purchase visuals that would show up in the dashboard of a car, how much extra would you pay on top of your existing radio investment? And the consensus of these 300 advertisers and agencies was an additional 14%. So as broadcasters sitting on this call, think about your revenue and think about plussing that up 10%, 14% based upon the Q visuals. So that's a significant increase. And obviously that is highly profitable, as an add-on to an existing radio campaign.
Omar, I would just give one fact-based. I am also a broadcaster in a town of 14,000 people in small market Kentucky. For those internationally, middle of the U.S., rural area, we at my stations are doing about $125,000 of visual revenue generation in a market that's doing about 1.5 million. So we're pushing up about 10% of our revenue as a result of this.
Wow. Pierre, I thought after the 14%, that was your mic drop and you were going to leave, not come back. But that's pretty impressive. That is pretty impressive data. Joe, is this kind of visualization only possible in HD and DAB Plus on the screen or even FM stations? How does that work?
Absolutely FM stations. So
wow.
Any station that has integrated with AutoStage.
Yes.
Which is a very easy integration with our back-end system. We can deliver these kind of rich visuals. We've worked very closely with Q. And Cumulus is another great example. The Cumulus has a number of stations that are not broadcasting in digital, that are participating in the Q visual ad network. So we are doing this at scale. These aren't outliers. There are thousands of stations now using this capability, combining Q with AutoStage for delivery, and then getting the benefit of the measurement and attribution out of AutoStage.
Omar, go ahead, Mike.
Okay. Ahead, Mike. I just wanted to reinforce that point. What we hear from a lot of our members, who are engaging now, is that the barrier to entry is really connecting. There's not a cost to participate, where then you have the capabilities that have been discussed today. And that is critical. And again, it goes back to the messages that are being sent to the advertisers. The universe is more robust, and the capabilities are real, and the value to the consumer is we're having more data that's leaning into the decisions that broadcasters are making, which Pierre mentioned before, but also to the advertisers, there's proof of concept that we now have available to us that we didn't before. But the barrier to entry is not very high.
Omar, there is one point that I just want to clarify.
Go ahead, Steve.
If you're an RDS only station, this technology, the Q technology, works extremely well with those stations only. Or if you're HD or DAB. But the great part about DTS AutoStage is that even if you're RDS only, your analog signal may just contain the RDS text, no logos, but we also feed you into DTS AutoStage. So vehicles that are equipped on that platform have an even greater experience. But you need not be anything other than an analog station to get involved, to get on this platform and start generating revenue with it, because the opportunities that are out there. And Joe, I don't think I'm overstepping on this. AM stations also feed into your DTS AutoStage.
Correct.
So an AM station that's had no metadata capability because of bandwidth can now take advantage of DTS as well, and can have a full connected experience. And it's a great technology, and we're seeing radio really evolve. And that's what I think those of us that are longtime radio broadcasters are so excited about right now.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, specifically around the revenue opportunity associated with Q. And I just want to reiterate it. I view this as a pyramid where all of the cars on the road today that support only analog and RDS, which in the US is about almost 300 million cars, they can all benefit from the basic RDS display monetization. Then on top of that, you've got a subset of cars that are both analog and HD radio, and that's about 120 million. And they get a slightly different experience because they usually have the visual capability in the HMI. And then the top of the pyramid, which is the smallest number right now, are the AutoStage cars. And those are the cars that can be enhanced with both broadcast and IP delivered content and measured. But as a broadcaster, you should think about Q as the entry point for monetization around the entire existing fleet of cars in your market. It's really quite powerful if you think about it along those lines.
We've got tons of questions we haven't got to, so this has been fascinating, and we'll probably speak a little bit more about a couple more things, but let me try and get through some of the questions. Here's Mimikasaris. How do you determine demographic profiles, registration of details as part of the opt-in process or by other means?
So it varies by OEM, the car manufacturer. The car manufacturer will share with us certain information about the vehicle itself, and we have a device ID so that we can deliver the service to the vehicle. We are moving with into targeting applications where we will actually get more specific individual demographic profiles, but we don't currently get that today. It's really vehicle brand, the market location, the home zip code, things that are really kind of more generic, but help us identify vehicles in the market.
Vaughn's got a question, technical around support receiving processing of subaudible tones and measurement platforms. Does DTS support that?
Yeah, so I think what you're asking is specifically like a Nielsen watermark. And in everything that we do on the broadcast side of our technology, HD radio specifically, is compliant with those watermarking technologies, meaning the watermark survives our encoding and decoding process. DTS AutoStage does not affect the broadcast signal at all. All we are doing is enhancing it via IP. So whatever watermark may be contained in an analog or HD or DAB broadcast is unaffected by DTS AutoStage.
Brad Gibb, we've dealt with this before, I think, but it's a good question. How does Xperi make money out of this?
Right. So we have a number of ways that we make money on this platform right now to ensure sustainability. The primary mechanism right now is the OEM will pay us a one-time license fee for lifetime access to our global API.
Okay, I'm sure that satisfies him. Alina, just wondering, wouldn't promoting visual advertising, I think is probably what she meant, while driving increase the risk of possible car accidents? Seems like it could distract drivers, compromise road safety. What guidelines or safeguards are there? What's the take on that when it does come up? Oh, okay.
Sure.
I think that's the question.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I
Go
answer
ahead.
that question a lot. I'm smiling not because it's not a serious question, but because I hear this very frequently. So the first thing that I would say is radio is catching up with all the other technology that's on the dashboard of the vehicles. So if you look at satellite radio, if you look at Spotify, CarPlay, Apple, any of these platforms that are there, Pandora, so many of them already provide this type of information to it. Secondly, the technology that we're utilizing in the States with DTS AutoStage and with HD Radio, they're NHTSA compliant, which is National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So we're very respectful of that. And so this next question is perfect timing. I'm not going to answer for DTS AutoStage, but we don't do videos on the platform, nor do we do QR codes because of the increased risk of driver distractions. So it's static. We don't present any type of logo or visual if it's less than 26 seconds because you don't want it to have this carousel effect where it's distracting. So we're compliant with that. We certainly don't want to add to the distraction, but it's done in a way that is compliant, minimizes the distraction, but catches radio up to the technologies that all of our competitors are already deploying.
Yeah, and if I can, I'll add to that, and then I'll take this question as well, Omar. When we implemented Artist Experience, which is our first visual feature with AutoStage, where the image was synchronized with the ad or the song, we worked very closely with the auto industry to design that in such a way that it would not be distracting. It actually, in a lot of the studies we did with OEMs, it was less distracting than even text because they called it a glanceable feature. You could glance, see an image, know exactly a lot of information about the content without having to read a text-based crawl. So it was done with intent and with the consent of the auto industry. In terms of videos, some of you on the call may have seen a press release that came out last month at CES, where we have implemented a video service in the car, in the front seat with Mercedes. This is our third video service. We have BMW, Audi, and now Mercedes all support our video service. In every one of those implementations, the video was only available if the car was in park. Well, Mercedes has changed the paradigm there, and I saw it for the first time at the show floor. They've implemented the video in a screen right in front of the passenger in the front seat of the car. What they've done, though, is they've integrated the video playback with the driver monitoring system. And this is very high tech, but I think it gives you a sense of where things are moving in the future. If the video is playing and the driver monitoring system notices the driver's eye gaze moving to the display of the video, it will pause the video. I was blown away by
Fascinating.
that.
Fascinating.
It gives you a sense of how aggressive automakers are being about bringing media into the car and finding that balance of how to offer it safely, and how to transition the offering as autonomy improves and gets more authorization country by country. Very, very interesting application.
This is a long one, and it's technical from Gareth. Just to confirm, the delivery paths in AutoStage is the primary audio intended to come from the vehicle's broadcast tuners, FM, AM, and where fitted DAB or HD radio, with the IP connection used mainly for the data layer like metadata, discovery, and analytics. And in weak coverage scenarios, can the IP path also carry the audio stream as a fallback, or is audio always broadcast first? What happens when there is no mobile signal or the data connection is weak?
Sure. This is a great question, and you're absolutely right. We offer the IP stream as you drive out of broadcast coverage, so that is available. And conversely, if you drive out of IP coverage, you just fall back to whatever the existing broadcast service is, whether it's DAB, HD radio, or analog, until you lose that broadcast signal.
Okay. Brazil, we've got Ricardo from Brazil. He says he has very low expectations of any digital radio interest in Brazil. But as far as DTS and Q are concerned, like you said before, FM, AM, no problem at all. It still
Yeah,
enhances the experience for the listener and the broadcaster. Yeah,
that's correct.
Okay, good. Let's look ahead. So Joe, you and your team's working tirelessly to reinvent radio in the car. You're doing a phenomenal job already. What does the next 5 years look like? Maybe 3 years, if you can't think that far ahead. But let's hear what you think.
I can definitely think that far ahead, and I think we've previewed it a little bit here. We've talked about targeting, consent, personalization, video, on-demand audio services. I think all of that is coming into the car. And the exciting thing about DTS AutoStage, not only from a services perspective, but also from a device perspective, is these are both upgradable, software upgradable infrastructure and software upgradable in-vehicle devices. We have already gone through multiple iterations of software upgrades with cars that are on the road that have deployed with this technology. So unlike legacy radio implementations that were hardware based, that were required a tuner, and there was no way to change the functionality once the vehicle rolled off the production line, that's completely changed. Radio is now a software-defined platform that can evolve and that we are heavily invested in innovating around. And I think you're not only going to see new features and services, but you will see new business models evolve. If you just think about the targeting capabilities and the measurement capabilities around IP delivered audio service today, whether it's Spotify or your own digital audio platforms and apps, much of that is going to come into the car and can be built easily on the AutoStage infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. To round up, broadcasters that we're watching today, some of them are from markets that might have few of these cars, but it's going to keep growing. You're increasing the number of brands that are going to have AutoStage anyway. What's the single most important first step they should take preparing for the connected car era in countries that maybe don't have an evolved market yet? And when should they take that step? Is there a time? Yeah,
I think the biggest thing that broadcasters can do today is begin to prepare for a world where metadata is absolutely critical to discovery and engagement. And you should not only prepare, but take control of that, own that as an activity, a production investment that's as important as the audio you're broadcasting itself. It is fundamental to where all these opportunities are going to evolve, and broadcasters really need to own that. Because if you don't own it, you don't control it, I can guarantee that some creative third-party technology partner or service is going to usurp that opportunity and do it, with or without your consent.
Yeah.
Omar, may I just add to that very quickly? Because Joe and I have seen this when I was at the NAB, because the broadcasters didn't understand the urgency of this or didn't understand the necessity of this in the States. There were third-party companies that began to create substitute services that would then override the local broadcasters' editorial control and put something on their product. And it's still remnants of it. It's improving, but one of the things we've talked about the revenue side, but one of the things Q really focuses on is programming information, metadata, strong management of the benefits of listening to the station, identifying different programs. It is so important, echoing what Joe said, getting your metadata strategy engaged, because that's going to be the opportunity for exploration and discovery coming forward. And that is really wherever you are in the world, getting your metadata engaged, starting, the old crawl, walk, run. We'll start crawling, start walking. Don't be intimidated by feeling like you got to do it all at one time, but get started on your metadata.
Fabulous. Fantastic advice. Mike, Pierre, if you've got anything to add before we round up.
Well, I was smiled when you said 5 years ahead. And Steve, in his time at NAB, was tasked by broadcasters who said at the time, and we were a part of those discussions, the dashboard is so important to our future as broadcasters. We need to make sure that we're paying attention to it. And, and what does the future hold? And there was lots of discussions and lots of best practices. And Steve can smile about that because he was certainly involved in a lot of those things. But I think about that 5-year span of 5 years ago and where we are today. And Omar, I don't know what 2 years from now is going to be, but sure. I know what I think 2 years, from the ad community, the word attribution is so important. Yes. And the capabilities will expand to that as we go forward. I have an anecdotal story that I would love to share for just a second. And it goes to your question about programming and decisions that are made in Pierre's story that he shared with the U.S. broadcaster around a concert. A year ago at the NAB in Las Vegas, there was a morning show host of a major market radio station in the U.S. who was unaware of DTS AutoStage. I was having a conversation with her about her market. Oh, I just gave it up. I didn't say who, just now we've eliminated 50%. My conversation with her was about the knowledge of her stations, her listeners, and her market. And I challenged her, how well do you know your market? And she said, well, very well. So I said, are you aware of DTS AutoStage? She was not. I walked her down to the booth. We pulled up her market. Joe and his team pulled up her market. Yeah. And exposed to her the tool. In particular, the heat map came on. And this was the reaction that she shared with me. Oh, I didn't know we were so strong in that part of town. Yeah. Now, you think about Pierre's example of sitting with the auto dealer and seeing the people that go by, or my example of that I used as well. But in her example, there was an entire part of the community that they weren't focused on that creates economic opportunities as well as service that were unaware, and literally just by looking at one of the slides in the presentation made a difference. So you don't know where that impact is going to have.
Last word to Pierre, if you want it.
Yeah, what my recommendation is, get your station to show up in DTS AutoStage. You can go on to their site, you can register your station, you can give them your streaming URL, you can start providing them the now playing playout data, and then your station will start to show up in this data. That's not 5 years from now, that's like right now. So I would do that right away.
Fantastic. This has been amazing, as you've heard from everybody that's watched. So many of them are delighted with what they've learned today. I want to thank all of you, Mike, Pierre, Steve, Joe, Xperi team, for making this possible. Just one word of advice, Steve. Stick with your day job. Jingles are not for you to sing. Liberty, liberty, liberty. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much to everybody for watching.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, DTS. Thank you, DTS AutoStage. Cheers.
Radio Week 2026.
Smart ideas for radio and audio operators.